There's no definite way of practicing the right things. But there's a best way, which is mostly the fastest and most efficient way of learning things. All the great heroes of jazz have walked this path, and all of them have used all the same tools in their creative process towards learning music. When you're learning jazz improvisation, there's a certain skill set you must master. First, you really want to be able to play your chord tones. Chord tones are the backbone of every jazz improvisation. These are the foundation of the songs we are playing and creates the tension and release which we are playing in songs. Secondly, you want to learn how to connect the chord tones through guide tone lines and forward motions. The third step is learning the scales which belongs to the chords. The scales is the glue that connects the gaps between the chord tones. The first exercise you really want to master is the arpeggio going up on all the chords. And you must change the rhythm when you're practicing this to spice things up. Rhythm is everything. When you're doing this, do not get attached to the root. The bass player is already playing the root, so you want to consider playing the chords upside down. Exactly like playing the chords up, you want to play the chords down and add exciting rhythm. On my Patreon you can easily download the lesson transcription, where I have all these examples with chords going up and down on this tune Blues for Alice. One of the things that makes music amazing is how it moves. You create this movement by connecting the chords to each other. A guide tone line is a chord note line moving through the song as a red line through the song. A great definition of a guide tone line is one chord note moving the closest way to a chord note in the next chord. In the beginning, it's a matter of learning all the connections of all the chord notes towards the chord notes in the next chord. Knowing where and what connections to use to get to the following chord. Go easy in the beginning. Begin by adding only one chord note per chord. Luckily, it could happen to you because it's mostly of one chord per bar. And as soon as you possibly can, add rhythm to your guide tone line. When you have the overview, add another chord note to your guide tone line. You take the chord note, you're thinking about your guide tone line. And then, in the chord you're in, you add a chord note above or under the chord note you're present on. Moving further on your present guide tone line, on the second chord, you also add a second chord note above or under the guide tone line note. Rhythm is the most important thing. You need to go all in on rhythm. Since jazz is all about rhythm, I'll say it again, rhythm is the most important thing. Already now you can play a pretty awesome solo just using the guide tone line, one extra chord note and rhythm. In the lesson manual on Patreon, I have added all these guide tone lines on Blues for Alice, on It Could Happen to You, and further on Olio, which we're going to look through in a moment, both with extra rhythm and chord examples. Add scales between your chord notes. When it comes to fluid motion, the chord note connecting to the next chord note is the most important thing. This is why you do not just add random scales or random positions of the scales on your chords. You want the scale to emphasize the chord function, and it's very important there's a certain emphasis on the chord notes. When starting to practice, add the chord notes in the scale on the beats. Just play the plain 7-note scale up and down the chords. But the 7-note scale is a very not so flexible sound. It's a big chunk of notes you have to put into your solo, and where do it fit? It's not flexible. And it's not really musical just to play the scale up and down. If we look at this system, every third in the chord, so between C and E, E and G, G and B, is transferred to a third in the scale. C, D, E, E, F, G, G, A, B. By dividing the scale into smaller chunks, it's very much easier to overview and it gets much more flexible. Take the first 3 notes of the scale and play around with these. Then take it further if you know all the scale intervals, or take the next interval. I'm playing a solo here where I'm using more intervals. The force in fluidly connecting solo lies in voice leading, forward motion and guide tone lines. Playing on another guide tone line in the rhythm change. Adding an extra chord note to the guide tone line. Add the scale between the chord note and the guide tone line. Play through this at rhythm. It's like a cooking recipe. Add this recipe to all the chord notes. Start everywhere on the horn, but follow this recipe. 4 steps. Lots of arpeggio exercises, guide tone lines and scales are added to these 3 standard tunes on the Patreon in the lesson manual. Go to the Patreon and get that easy download. You see here on Blue Bossa I'm doing the exact same system. Getting into this way of practicing and playing, you will always have a go-to method. Being able to approach it and know how to solo over it. It's an easy and reliable method which enables you to play almost over all jazz standards. Take this a step further and check these 2 videos out. Play music, have fun.